March 21, 2002, Seaside, Hartlepool, United Kingdom. A man walks into a police station 6 years after he died. His name? John Darwin. Declared dead in 2002 after his canoe was found wrecked along the rocky coast of Hartlepool. His family held a funeral. His sons mourned. His wife sobbed through interviews. But now, here he was, alive. Calm. Clean-shaven. Like nothing happened. What really happened that day at sea? How do you fake your death and stay gone for years? And why would your own wife help you? There were whispers of a mistress, a life in Panama, and 2 sons betrayed. This is not fiction. Every detail is real. And what they found in the photos changed everything. Subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story and watch to the end, because this is a lie bigger than death itself. March 21, 2002, 8 a.m., Hartlepool, England. The cold wind blew across the North Sea. Fishermen were already at work. The sky was gray. Seagulls cried above. On the rocky beach below, a red canoe lay smashed on the shore. There was no man in sight. The waves hit hard. Cold. Rough. Loud. Police arrived. Then the Coast Guard. And then, silence. John Darwin, 51, had vanished. He had taken his canoe out early that morning. He was last seen paddling out into rough waters. Hours later, only the broken boat returned. No one saw him again. Until 6 years later, when he walked into a police station. Alive. But how? Why? And where had he been all this time? The man behind the disappearance. John Darwin wasn't a criminal. Not at first. He was a former teacher. A father of 2 sons. A husband. A neighbor. A man who smiled often and waved at passers-by. But something was wrong beneath the surface. In 2002, John was deep in debt. He and his wife, Anne Darwin, had made some risky investments in rental properties. They borrowed too much money. The interest piled up. The walls were closing in. They were about to lose everything. And then, John had an idea. An idea so wild, it might actually work. A family with secrets. John and Anne lived in a modest home in Canoe, a small seaside town near Hartlepool. They had been married for over 30 years. Their sons, Mark and Anthony, were grown up, living their own lives. To everyone, they looked like a normal, happy family. But behind closed doors, John and Anne were desperate. One night, sitting at their dining room table, John whispered the plan. "If I die, Anne, the dead dies with me." Anne stared at him, shocked. "You want to fake your death?" John nodded. He explained everything. He would pretend to drown at sea. Anne would report him missing. The insurance company would pay out thousands. She could keep the house, pay the debts, start over. At first, Anne refused. But John kept talking. He said it would only be for a little while. Just long enough to escape the banks. Just long enough to collect the insurance. Eventually, she said yes. And that was the beginning of the lie. The day he died. March 21, 2002. John woke early. It was cold, windy, and gray, perfect weather for an accident. He kissed Anne goodbye. She pretended not to cry. Then he walked to the garage, pulled out his red canoe, and wheeled it to the beach. Locals saw him launch into the choppy sea. By 10 a.m., the Coast Guard received Anne's call. Her husband hadn't come home. A search began immediately. Boats scanned the waters. Helicopters circled above. Hours later, the canoe washed up, empty and broken. No sign of John. The search went on for days. Divers looked. Planes flew overhead. People prayed. But John Darwin was gone. Declared dead by drowning. A funeral without a body. And held a memorial. Family and friends gathered to mourn. Their two sons, Mark and Anthony, stood by their mother, confused and heartbroken. There was no body. Just a framed photo of John. A few flowers. Tears. The newspapers called it a tragic loss. Neighbors brought food. Everyone said the same thing. John was such a kind man. Anne smiled through her grief. But inside, she was hiding the biggest lie of her life. The secret life begins while the world mourned. John was alive. He had never gone far. Just hours after his death, he slipped quietly into a secret apartment, right next to the family home. A hidden door in the back hallway connected the two places. At night, Anne would sneak food to him. They would whisper and plan. John didn't go outside during the day. When he had to, he wore a long coat and a cap pulled low. No one suspected a thing. Over time, John created a fake identity, John Jones. He even got a false passport. He and Anne began planning their escape to a tropical country, where no one would know their names. The insurance payout months after the disappearance, Anne filed for John's life insurance. The companies believed her. She received over £250,000, more than $400,000 at the time. It should have been enough. But greed is never satisfied. Instead of staying quiet and hidden, John wanted more. A new life in Panama by 2006, 4 years had passed. John had grown bolder. He started going outside more. Wearing disguises. Using fake names. Traveling short distances. Eventually, he told Anne, "Let's go somewhere far. Somewhere warm." They chose Panama. They flew there together, using their fake identities. They bought property. Made business plans. Took photos, smiling, happy, free. They wanted to build an eco-resort and live in the jungle. No more lies. Just freedom. Or so they thought. Because back in England, a storm was brewing. The photo that exposed everything in Panama, John and Anne posed for a picture. They stood arm in arm with a local real estate agent. Smiling. The photo was taken for a website that showed new property owners. They didn't think twice. But someone else did. Back in the UK, an anonymous tipster sent that photo to the police. Isn't this the man who died in 2002? Investigators compared the image. It was him. John Darwin. Alive. Living freely. Smiling. The return from the dead. On December 1, 2007, John Darwin walked into a London police station. He looked nervous, but clean, calm, and dressed like a businessman. He told the officer at the desk, "I think I'm a missing person." The officer stared. "What do you mean?" "My name is John Darwin. I think I am supposed to be dead." The station went silent. He said he had amnesia. Claimed he had wandered the streets for years, lost and confused. But police didn't buy it. Because they already had the photo from Panama. And they already knew. The lie was over. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. December 1, 2007. London. A small, grey room. No windows. Just 2 chairs and a table. John Darwin sat alone. Hands clasped. Eyes restless. 2 detectives entered. One of them slid a photo across the table. The image from Panama. John's face stiffened. "This you?" the detective asked. Silence. John swallowed hard. Then came the crack in his voice. "Yes. It's me." The amnesia story crumbled in seconds. John Darwin, once lost at sea, had just returned from the dead, and handed himself in. But why? Because the net was closing in, and Darwin was about to face the full weight of the truth. The call that changed everything. Anne Darwin sat in her home in Seaton Carew when the phone rang. "Mrs. Darwin?" said the voice on the other end. "We have your husband." Anne froze. She thought they had more time. She thought they'd vanish again before the light caught up to them. But John had confessed. And now it was all unraveling. She was arrested just days later. The widow the world had pitied was no widow at all. The sons betrayed. The worst part wasn't the arrest. It wasn't the news headlines or the public shame. It was the betrayal of their sons, Mark and Anthony. For 6 years, they had mourned their father. They grieved. They struggled. They believed their mother was suffering with them. And now? They learned it had all been a lie. Every tear. Every hug. Every holiday dinner. Fake. Mark Darwin told reporters. "The moment I found out, I felt like my whole childhood had been a scam." Anthony was more private. But friends say he fell into deep depression. They had defended their mother for years. Now, they couldn't even look her in the eye. The public explosion. News outlets exploded with headlines. "Back from the dead. Canoe con man caught. The widow who lied." The media couldn't get enough. John and Anne's faces were plastered on every screen. Their photos from Panama, grinning in paradise, juxtaposed with images of grieving sons and their Hartlepool memorial. Talk shows debated their sanity. Was it greed? Desperation? Or just cold-blooded betrayal? The public wanted answers. And they'd get them. In court. The trial of the century. July 2008. Crown Court, London. John and Anne Darwin stood trial for multiple counts of fraud, deception, and money laundering. They faced up to 10 years in prison each. The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled every word. The prosecution didn't hold back. These two didn't just steal money. They stole trust. They abused their own children's grief. They pretended for years. They lived a lie. Anne wept in the dock. John stared straight ahead, expressionless. The evidence mounts. Piece by piece, the prosecution revealed the web of lies. The hidden apartment next door. The backdoor connection between the two homes. The fake passports. The Panama photos. Bank statements. Real estate deals. Emails between Anne and John, joking about living the dream. And worst of all, a letter John wrote to Anne just months before his reappearance. "We've got away with it this long. I sometimes forget I'm supposed to be dead." The courtroom gasped. Anne's emotional collapse. But then, Anne turned. She testified against her own husband. She told the court she had been manipulated, emotionally blackmailed, and dragged into the lie by John. "I didn't want to go along with it," she said, trembling. "But I was scared. I didn't know how to get out." She broke down on the stand, sobbing. The jury listened closely. Was she a victim? Or a partner? The verdict. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned. Guilty. John Darwin, guilty on all charges. Anne Darwin, guilty, too, but with the court acknowledging she was under emotional pressure. John received 6 years and 3 months. Anne got 6 years and 6 months. They were led away in handcuffs. The courtroom remained silent. Justice, it seemed, had finally caught up to the Canoe couple. Live behind bars. In prison, John adjusted quickly. He stayed quiet. Kept to himself. Took a job in the prison library. Anne, on the other hand, suffered. She barely spoke. She wrote letters to her sons, apologies they never answered. She joined counseling sessions. She cried herself to sleep. And she served every single day of her sentence with a heavy heart. Because while the world saw a criminal, she had lost everything that mattered. Men holding hands emoji, the son's final goodbye. After the trial, Mark and Anthony made a joint statement. "We cannot understand how our parents did this to us. We were used, lied to, and humiliated in front of the world. We will never forgive them." Neither son visited during their prison terms. Neither wrote back. Neither answered calls. The family was shattered beyond repair. Even after release, the silence remained. Anne lived alone, quietly, far from Seth and Canoe. John vanished from public view altogether. The real reason he came back. Years later, in a rare interview, a former friend of John's revealed something chilling. He didn't come back out of guilt. He came back because the Panama deal fell through. He couldn't live there legally anymore. He had no choice. It wasn't redemption. It was desperation. The final twist in a story full of lies. Truth doesn't just find the light. Sometimes, it walks back into it, after faking its own death. 4 stories more unbelievable than fiction. Subscribe now to that unbelievable true story. Because this story isn't over yet. What happened after prison? Did Anne redeem herself? Did John vanish forever? And how did this scandal change laws around insurance fraud forever? Wakefield Prison, 2008. The steel door clanks open. John Darwin, now prisoner #83190T, blinks in the pale light of the prison corridor. His hair is thinner. His eyes tired. The confidence he once had is gone. He's no longer the man who beat death. He's just another inmate. Across town, Anne Darwin sits in a separate cell at Low Newton Prison, awaiting sentencing. Alone. Ashamed. But the real damage? It's already been done. To their sons. To their family. To the truth. The press has a name for it now. The Canoe Con. Headlines scream betrayal. Dead man walking, the unbelievable fraud of John Darwin. Wife knew all along, sons devastated. Canoe Con man could get 10 years. Tabloids feast on every detail. TV stations replay the same photo from Panama, over and over again. John and Anne, smiling with their arms around a real estate agent, proof that the widow had been in on the scam from the beginning. The public is furious. Because this wasn't just fraud. It was emotional terrorism. They fooled the government, their neighbors, their own children. Mark and Anthony Darwin are quiet for days. Then, in a televised interview, they speak. Anthony's voice trembles. "We trusted her. We believed our dad was dead. We grieved for him." Mark adds, "To find out it was all a lie, it destroyed something in me." They had both hugged their mother at the funeral. They had both stood in court to defend her when she cried. And it was all fake. One paper called it a Shakespearean betrayal. And in the middle of it all, Anne Darwin breaks. She weeps in court. She tells the jury, "I wish I could turn back time. I wish I had said no." In July 2008, the trial comes to a close. John and Anne Darwin are found guilty on all counts. Fraud. Conspiracy to obtain life insurance by deception. Making false statements. John is sentenced to 6 years and 3 months. Anne is sentenced to 6 years and 6 months. She gets more time, because, according to the judge, her lies had a deeper emotional impact. Judge Mr. Justice Wilkie delivers a brutal message. "You made your sons mourn you while you were secretly alive. That is cruelty beyond words." The courtroom is still. And sobs. John just stares. Another silence. The kind that follows shame. Prison is a different world. Gone are the palm trees of Panama. Gone are the whispered plans of eco-resorts. Now it's 4 gray walls, thin blankets, and cold food. John tries to keep to himself. Other inmates taunt him. Hey, dead man. Float back to Panama yet? He spends his days reading, pacing, thinking. And writes letters, sometimes to her sons, sometimes to no one. She starts therapy. Begins to accept what she did. She even writes a memoir, part confessional, part apology. But redemption won't come easy. Because outside those prison walls, the world is still talking. TV networks produce documentaries. Headlines don't stop. Reporters follow Mark and Anthony. A TV dramatization is fast-tracked. Newspapers run retrospectives. How 2 parents tricked the world, the greatest hoax of modern Britain. People ask the same questions over and over again. How did no one notice? How could a mother do this to her own children? Did they ever truly love anyone but themselves? The Darwins become a case study in deception. Psychologists weigh in. Criminologists call it a rare example of familial fraud driven by shared delusion. But the people who suffered most? The sons. Because they lost more than a father. They lost their entire past. Mark and Anthony Darwin stop visiting their mother. They cut off contact with John entirely. Their statements grow colder. Our parents lied. We're focusing on building our own lives. For years, they live in the shadow of the scandal. Job interviews are awkward. Dating is difficult. Every time someone Googles them, the Canoe story resurfaces. They carry the weight of betrayal, not just public, but personal. Anthony reportedly seeks counseling. Mark refuses all interview requests after 2010. They are survivors of something deeper than fraud. They survived emotional abandonment. And they're trying to build a life beyond it. In 2011, Anne is released early for good behavior. She walks out of prison quietly. No cameras. No smiles. She moves to a modest flat in York and begins volunteering for a local charity. She avoids interviews. But when asked if she regrets it all, she says, "Every day. But I can't undo it. All I can do now is try to do some good." John is released months later. He walks out wearing the same blank stare he wore in court. But there's no family waiting. No Anne. No sons. He's truly alone. He relocates to the Philippines, where no one knows his name. The Canoe Man became a legend. There are memes, jokes, podcasts, even a TV miniseries called The Thief, His Wife, and the Canoe. Some viewers are entertained. Some are outraged. But one thing is clear. The story of John and Anne Darwin isn't just about fraud. It's about desperation, greed, and the terrifying things people will do when they believe there's no way out. It's also about how love, twisted by lies, can destroy not only trust, but identity. Because when you fake your own death, you're not just running from money problems. You're killing who you are. Experts analyze the case. Dr. Linda Papadopoulos, psychologist. What's fascinating is not just the deception, but the shared psychology. Anne enabled it. John rationalized it. Together, they created an alternate reality. Criminologist David Wilson. This wasn't a split-second crime. This was sustained. Planned. Cold. They fooled government systems, police investigators, and their own flesh and blood. The Darwin's case is now taught in criminal justice courses. It's referenced in law books under fraudulent misrepresentation. It is legendary. And terrifyingly human. 10 years later, A man walks along a beach in Southeast Asia. His hair is gray now, his back hunched slightly. He looks out at the sea. Waves crash softly against the shore. He closes his eyes. For a moment, he remembers that morning. The wind. The water. The lie. He once said, "If I die, the dead dies with me." But what he didn't realize was that truth always finds a way to surface. Even from the bottom of the sea. This story wasn't fiction. Every detail you heard is real, documented, and reported in the UK's most trusted outlets. And if this left you speechless, imagine what the next one will do. Subscribe to that unbelievable true story. Because some stories aren't just unbelievable. They're unforgettable. Philippines, 2016. A sweaty afternoon in the small seaside town of Antipolo. John Darwin, now in his 60s, walks the streets unnoticed. His face has aged, leathery from the sun. He now lives with a much younger woman named Mercy Mahavila, whom he met online after his release from prison. They're not legally married. They don't need to be. Because here, John Darwin isn't the Canoe man. He's just another British expat hiding in plain sight. Locals whisper about the odd man who pays in cash, keeps to himself, and avoids phones. He's building a modest life. One room, a garden, cheap rent. But inside that weathered man is a storm of memories he'll never outrun. The moment he dragged his canoe into the water. The lies he whispered to Anne. The faces of Mark and Anthony. Broken, crying. The cell door closing behind him. He faked his death once. But this time, he's living in the ghost of his own past. Back in the UK, 2016. Anne Darwin volunteers quietly at a local hospice. She keeps her head down. Lives simply. No car. No credit cards. No deception. She writes to her sons every Christmas. Only one letter was ever returned. She knows she's lost them. But she hopes, prays, they've found peace. "I don't expect forgiveness," she says once in a rare interview. "But I do want them to know. I never stopped loving them." She's been offered book deals. Movie rights. She declined them all. She doesn't want to profit from pain. Despite Anne's low profile, the public memory of the Canoe man lives on. In 2022, ITV releases a 4-part drama, The Thief, His Wife and the Canoe, starring Eddie Marsan and Monica Dolan. It becomes a sensation. The UK is captivated all over again. Younger audiences, who were children when it happened, are stunned that it wasn't fiction. Searches for John Darwin fraud spike on Google. Podcasts revisit the scandal. But what makes the story endure? It's not just the deception. It's the coldness. The audacity. The emotional destruction left in their wake. 2023. Mark Darwin breaks his silence. In an op-ed for The Guardian, he writes, "There's no neat way to package betrayal. My parents turned a tragic lie into a twisted fantasy. And let their sons believe they were orphans. I've moved on. But there are still days I can't look at water without hearing his voice." He declines interviews but approves the TV dramatization. He wants the truth to be told, not to vilify his parents, but to remind people. Not all wounds are visible. Some take root in silence. Criminologists continue to dissect the Darwins. Their conclusion? This wasn't about thrill-seeking. It was about escape, from debt, from failure, from responsibility. But most importantly, it was enabled by mutual delusion. Dr. Paul Britton, forensic psychologist. John and Anne Darwin are a rare psychological case. They existed in a bubble of shared fantasy. They normalized deceit until they could no longer distinguish lies from life. Their story is now a case study taught at Cambridge and Oxford in criminology and ethics. It serves as a warning. Even ordinary people, parents, spouses, neighbors, are capable of the unthinkable when desperation meets opportunity. After the Darwin case, UK authorities tightened insurance protocols. Greater oversight of life insurance claims. Enhanced cooperation between the police and financial institutions. New standards for presumed death declarations. Nicknamed the Darwin reforms, the legal changes make it significantly harder to pull off similar frauds today. What John and Anne did shook not just a nation, but its legal system. Philippines, 2024. John Darwin stands outside a modest home. Mercy May has left him. Rumors say she found a younger man with money. He is once again alone. No wife. No children. No legacy. He spends his days walking the beach. He avoids British tourists. Sometimes, he tells people his name is John Jones. But every now and then, someone recognizes him. "Hey, you that Canoe bloke." He denies it. But his eyes give it away. Because when you fake your death once, your truth never fully returns. John Darwin is now in his early 70s. He lives on a modest pension and what's left of a family inheritance. He is banned from profiting from his story. Anne Darwin, in her quiet life in England, continues to volunteer. She still writes her sons. She hasn't heard from them in over a decade. Mark and Anthony have new families, children of their own. But they never speak of their grandparents. Because the past didn't just die. It drowned. The same beach. The same water. Waves crash against the rocks, as they always have. And in the distance, far from the shore, a lonely canoe bobs in the waves. Empty. Forgotten. Just like the man who once paddled it toward oblivion. This isn't fiction. It's real. Documented. Proven. And it didn't just fool the investigators. It fooled a nation. And broke a family forever. Subscribe to that unbelievable true story for more real-life mysteries. Because truth is stranger than lies.